Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. This week I'm going to be taking a look at the debut album from Arc of Life, self-titled. And now in a recent Prog magazine issue, this band there was an interview with members of this band, and explicitly it said in the title of the article, "We are not Yes." And that statement is aimed at folks like me, because in some ways I've been hotly anticipating this album for almost 30 years. And the roots of that anticipation goes all the way back to 1991, when Rick Wakeman, keyboardist for Yes, and then at the time on the Union Tour, made a statement in a documentary where he said,
"I have a strange suspicion that there could be a Yes in existence way after I'm dead and buried." And that might sound crazy, in the same way that there will be a New York Philharmonic or whatever, or a Boston Symphony Orchestra. I really feel there's going to be a Yes way into the 21st century. And way after we're dead and gone, we might be just part of the history book.
Now that fateful statement at that time, of course being a Yes fan for a long time, set my wheels in motion for looking at the future of Yes. You know, I'm a person who got on board with Yes in 90125, and I have a very open idea about what is possible with Yes. You know, Yes has always been defined by a rotating personnel changes throughout the group, but the name of Yes has always had a certain consistency to it. And that's partially because Yes has always been able to carry on in their style while integrating new members. Individual voices in the group were always able to come and contribute to the band's forward progress throughout history. And for some people, that's always been a cause for concern and some challenges. You know, people who are old school, I like to call Starship Troopers, the people who like the 70s iteration of Yes, are very tied to their kind of high progressive period. People who got on board in the 80s may be more fans of their more muscular, virtuosic styles, but still kind of pop-oriented style that they had going on there. But in between those two factions of the group, there's this very interesting album that showed up in 1980 called Drama. And if you can get on board with what happened with Drama, you can see how what Rick Wakeman is talking about in that statement could be a possibility. Because in Drama in 1980, John Anderson had quite famously left Yes in the late 70s, along with Rick Wakeman. And both those guys are very big personalities of the band. And of course, Yes folks thought that there was no way that Yes could go on without them. But Chris Squire and Steve Howe quite smartly enlisted the help of Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes, who were the Buggles. And the Buggles were the group that did the song "Video Killed the Radio Star." And those two musicians were stalled in the keyboard and lead singer positions. And that lineup of the band made Drama. Now, Drama is a fantastic album, I think, and one that most Yes fans will have to at least admit is a good album, if not a great Yes album. And if you can get on board with the idea that Drama is a great Yes album without John Anderson as a lead singer, then you can kind of understand the idea that maybe Yes is about more than just its players. The Drama crew reconvened in 2011 to make the album Fly From Here. Now, Fly From Here is a little bit of a pretty good Yes album, passable Yes album. At that time, Benoit David was the lead singer, but Trevor Horn had come on as producer, and Jeff Downes was rehired as the keyboardist, and this continues to live on as keyboardist for Yes to this day. And although Fly From Here was a pretty good Yes album, it didn't really show a possibility for Yes's progression in the future. Most of the tracks on Fly From Here were unused or underdeveloped Drama ideas that they kind of brought out of mothballs and developed into the album. So although it was a pretty good album, it seemed like kind of a dead end. Not too long after that, Benoit David was again fired from the group as lead vocalist, and they brought on John Davison. I was really on board with John Davison because it seemed like, although we would all like to see John Anderson back in the group, his ethos and the way that he plays and his love for Yes music really allowed him to perform a lot of John Anderson's music in a convincing way. And that lineup of the group made the album Heaven and Earth. Now, Heaven and Earth was probably not the greatest Yes album ever. Its playing was low energy. Sometimes I would even say kind of geriatric by that point. And the songwriting was kind of underdeveloped and the production was not so great. Yes is the kind of band that really needs a producer that's going to be hands-on with them. And the producer on that album was not much more than just an engineer, according to the reports from the guys in the band. But what I did like about Heaven and Earth is that it showed some sort of forward momentum, some possibility for Yes continuing to be an artistically successful band in the future, because John Davison was coming on and doing some writing. Actually, seemed like he was just pinning people down, going to various members in Yes and writing songs with them to see what would work. Shortly after that, Chris Squire fell ill with leukemia and was not going to be able to tour or play with the group. So he requested that Billy Sherwood, who had actually gone in and remixed Heaven and Earth after they'd had some trouble with the production, to come in and be the stand-in bass player for him. And we know we've seen the previous post from Open Your Eyes, Billy Sherwood has a history with Yes that reaches all the way back to the Union album, has a very strong presence in the 90s with Open Your Eyes and The Ladder. So Billy Sherwood had a long history with the group, and although his installation as bass player was problematic and not super well received, because a lot of people felt like Chris Squire was the one guy that was in Yes the entire time and that he was Yes. And then Chris Squire passed away, and he very explicitly asked Billy Sherwood to come on and be the Yes bass player and continue the Yes name. So that all being said, in the light of the fact that I felt like that Heaven and Earth was not the greatest Yes album, but it felt like there was some possibility that Yes could still be creative in the future, especially if you think of the idea perhaps Billy Sherwood and John Davison co-writing things, kind of in the same way that maybe Chris Squire and John Anderson would at one point in their career co-write things. But the playing on Heaven and Earth was kind of so flat, and it seemed so sort of dialed in. I started playing mental games with myself around that same time. What would happen? What kind of lineup would make a sort of a new Yes, all new fresh blood in Yes, but still players that were maybe from a next generation but had ties to the Yes history, and that could make a version of Yes that could pick up the torch and still carry the Yes name on for another 15 or 20 years creatively. Now, it seemed like to me in my mind I had a lock on John Davison and Billy Sherwood, but filling in the other slots were tricky because those slots were still being used, but it was just hypothetical, just kind of a fun thought experiment. So then I started thinking about drummers. Alan White is still playing passable drums for the most part, but it just feels like when I listen to him play, it seems like it hurts. You know, I feel like he's having a hard time, which is why he brought on drummer Jay Shellen to kind of be his backup drummer. Well, back in this post, I had cited Jay Shellen as a possible replacement for Alan White because his playing style is in that same kind of high concept but hard-hitting style, and he has ties with Billy Sherwood through Circa, and also, although kind of not really ties with Steve Howe because he also played with Asia, so he has connections to the Yes family tree. And it seemed to make sense. He would be able to pick up the torch with what Alan White was doing and just carry forward in his own style. And the guitar player was another matter, because that would mean that Steve Howe would have to admit, okay, well, I'm going to retire. Who can come in and take my place? And after taking a look at Billy Sherwood's work with Circa and then looking through some liner notes, I came up with the idea of Jimmy Hahn stepping in that spot. Jimmy Hahn is a fantastic guitar player who stylistically can play really well in both the style of Trevor Rabin and in the style of Steve Howe, and also is an uncredited guitar player from the Union album. Which, if you think about it that way, the Union album actually is even more important because this is also where Billy Sherwood had his first writing credits with Yes. So not only is Union
homogenizing
in the past of Yes, it could also potentially project the future of Yes through connections with Billy Sherwood and Jimmy Hahn. So Jimmy Hahn was my choice for that particular player. So those four people, Billy Sherwood, John Davison, Jay Shellen, and Jimmy Hahn, all were players that I had thought back in 2014 could make up a new Yes. Well, guess what? That's 4/5 of the new lineup for Arc of Life. So historically, the big hot seat in Yes has always been the keyboard throne, right? Like in Spinal Tap, it was always the drummer the joke was the drummer was always the person they were replacing. And there's been more people in the keyboard seat of Yes than almost any other position. And so that was always the wild card one for me. I had several people I thought would be really good in that position. Oliver Wakeman was a guy who was playing with Yes in the 2010s, who never really got a chance to contribute to the Yes canon. And as the son of Rick Wakeman, it's kind of a no-brainer. But you have to ask yourself, is he really an innovative keyboard player or a really good keyboard player with a good last name? That was sort of my problem with that one. And then, of course, Tom Brisson was another one. I really felt like he's a fantastic, fantastic keyboard player that never really got his chance to show what he could do to contribute to Yes. So both of those guys are kind of my choices. I also my dream team choice was to put Gleb Kolyadin in that spot, because Gleb Kolyadin, he's from I Am the Morning Russian keyboardist. Again, no connection to the Yes family tree. But if there's one guy that really could pick up the Rick Wakeman torch of being a top-notch classically trained keyboard player, but is also innovative and a great composer, it'd be very fascinating to see him contribute to the Yes name. But in the case of Arc of Life, Dave Kersner has had a long-standing relationship with Billy Sherwood, so it's logical that he could be put in that position. And his keyboard playing is fine. It's a little more along the lines of Tony Kaye's more kind of muted style of playing than maybe Rick Wakeman's more flamboyant style, which is what I kind of connect with the most as far as Yes history goes. But regardless, Dave Kersner's the fifth member of Arc of Life. He does a fantastic job on the keyboards on this album. Now, the point of me talking about all this is just to kind of indicate not only that I was right, but also this particular lineup that is Arc of Life really could, in a way, claim the Yes name if they were brave enough to. Now, let's say that'd be a dumb idea. But straight up, that's not a great idea. I mean, can you imagine the hate mail they would get from the Yes fan base? It would be ridiculous. But from that perspective, it's not such a great idea. But at the same time, looking at Arc of Life, it's difficult not to think about who their fan base is. Who are the people that are going to be listening to Arc of Life? Besides curious Yes listeners, they're going to be their audience. So it's not entirely unfair to point that at them and say, look at them in terms of them being a Yes, like an untitled Yes group. But it's also kind of unfair because it brings lots of baggage on it. And to be honest, Arc of Life, in my opinion, it would not be a really great Yes album. The style of the writing is a little bit more AOR, a little more album-oriented rock than the average Yes album, even like the 80s, more their succinct work. There's a couple of songs towards the end that do lean towards a more open-ended Yes sound. It's good, and it's catchy, and it's well instrumented. The songs are capable, sometimes a little bit goofy in the lyrics, but not unbearably so. So I think that if you're a person like me who's a big generator and has a more open-ended idea about what Yes is and the possibilities of different lineups of Yes, you might be able to get something out of this. You might enjoy it. I strongly think that most of the time Starship Troopers will not be into this album. But to be honest, I think that most Starship Troopers have checked out from Yes by now already. So the really question, though, for me, that when I run up across this and I'm listening to is why? Why does it not quite work as a Yes album? Well, I think there's a couple reasons for that. Number one reason is the sort of a weird paradox. Because Yes was always composed of players with very distinct voices. And those members were able to get together and get those voices to kind of combine in different ways. When a person's voice is removed, they were able to plug another person into there and let them kind of be themselves up to a point. I think that kind of waned a little bit later on in Yes's career, but definitely like in their heyday, they had the Relay album. Patrick Moraz came in. He played that one album's worth of fantastic keyboard playing that sounds like no other keyboardist that they ever had in the group, but still sounds like Yes. So that issue makes it difficult when you put all new voices in there, because For them to make a Yes album, you'd have to point at them and say, okay, now we're going to make a Yes album. And the entire time, Billy Sherwood would be asking himself, what would Chris Squire do? The entire time, rather than doing what he would do. Now, I will tell you, the one person on this recording that really does that well, that really keeps his own voice but still contributes in a way that sounds like it would be Yes, is Jimmy Holland. He's all over this album. His playing is so great. Has a voice on his guitar that seems to naturally sit right between Trevor Rabin and Steve Howe. It's fantastic. By and large, the other players are using their own voices, and because of that, it doesn't quite gel into a Yes sound. And part of the problem with that is, the second issue is that Yes has been so musically stagnant for so long. They've released 2 albums, and their tours have been all just kind of covers of previous things. They're such in danger of becoming their own tribute band that we have not had a chance to see what it would look like for an established Yes to have Billy Sherwood in his bass player. He's had no time to really develop his particular voice inside of the Yes that's already there. That's the main reason why this question is even on the table at all. Why people look at Arc of Life and want it to be Yes, because Yes has done nothing for so long. And I get that for those guys, it's a big investment. They've been at this for a long time, and really making albums at this point in time is a labor of love. You're not really going to make too much money off of it. Most of your money is going to be made going out and playing the stuff that you're already established with. And I get that. I understand it. But there are those of us who look back on what Rick Wakeman said back then, and Chris Squire actually echoed later on whenever he brought Billy Sherwood on and asked him to carry on in his place, that would love to see that happen and like to see Yes continue. But in any case, we have Arc of Life now, which is an enjoyable album on its own. It's definitely an album, I think, that if you're a fan of Billy Sherwood, of the Open Your Eyes era, of Circa, and that leg of the Yes family tree, you'll dig it. There's great stuff on there, and there's a lot of really great playing on there. But yeah, just don't call it Yes. And that's all I got to say about Arc of Life for this week. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe and share it out with your friends. Of course, follow me over on Spotify. I'm trying to put tracks up from this year. There'll be an Arc of Life track up on my playlist. And I'll be coming at you again next week. Until then, catch you on the flip side.